I'm mostly inspired by nature. I would say that. Again, I grew up kind of on my own for the most part, and so I spent a lot of time outside. And so I always look to like the color palette and like the grains of wood or the color of feathers or things like that. I love that natural contrast that you saw. I kind of almost like correlated it to cooking because I also grew up on I ended up living on like a hippie commune when I was really young. And so they one of the things they teach you is like you always pair food, like you pair the if you were gonna eat like a bird or something like that, you would tend to pair it with the types of fruits that the bird would eat in real life and they naturally taste good together. And I kind of like adopted that conceptually into like how I would look for colors and for balance.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I never thought about like when you look at a feather, like it's so gorgeous. Like even like the most like basic feather like has
The
so
most
many
basic feather.
has so many color
Yeah.
variations and yeah. That's cool. That's like a good inspiration right there.
Yeah. I mean, like even like the color of like the legs of birds versus like the color of the feathers. Like you don't think about it until you see one up close and like how beautiful the contrast is. And you could get super nerdy with like all of the science of color and like the scientific names that like make it visually appealing to like the human psyche. But I found all of that to be super, super interesting. So that's my
Yeah.
general driving force.
So I imagine you started out probably just like experimenting, like mixing colors together, but is it now more of like a science?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a science. I think now, I mean, I guess yes and no. It's not always a science, but I think now I tend to try and create. I'll try and draw digitally first because I think it allows me to experiment at a vaster rate than when I do stuff in person with painting, because painting has a lot of rework and prep time. And so that's about 90% of the time actually when you're creating something. And so in order to avoid that, I do a lot of it digitally now. And that allows me to like play with the color palettes and the textures a lot more. And then when I find something that I'm pretty stoked on and happy with, I then try and kind of like reverse engineer it and be like, okay, so how am I going to apply that technique? What type of tools am I going to need to create it? And then you go one step back and you're like, cool, what science do I need to know about the paint system and like how I'm going to have to apply it in order to use that type of tool? And yeah,
Gotcha.
and then start.
What program do you use for your prototyping then?
I use Adobe Illustrator a lot for any like sort of like surface design, and then I use Adobe Design, um, or not Design, sorry, Dimension a lot for like higher 3D renders if I was going to do a presentation for like a higher end still or something like that.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I was gonna say like technical challenges. It sounds like there's probably a lot of technical challenges about like reverse engineering colors that you see out in the world and all of that.
Yeah, yeah, I think paint is really cool, but one of the big struggles with paint is durability. And a lot of that comes down to like the knowledge of the system you're putting in, how you like prep your substrate or whatever material you're going to paint, how you're going to apply the original primers or colors and then clear coats on top, and the time frame in which you're allowed to do that, and then making sure they don't get any sort of like oddities on them while you're in the painting process, any sort of vapor or chemical exposure, something like that that would keep it from being as bonded as it needs to be. Yeah, and then the more you're kind of applying odd textures, people are really into like hydro dipping currently, where you'll like basically put a bunch of paints on a tension of the water on top and you dip something in, and kind of like how all those stick, right? So it's very different from like spraying paint through a gun, which is how most of the time it's professionally applied. But yeah, there's a lot of thoughts in there.
Yeah, totally. And I imagine like when you first started out, you probably had a very limited tool set, but now I imagine you have a pretty nice tool set at your disposal.
I have a pretty decent tool set now. Yeah, Todd was nice enough when he taught me to let me just consistently ruin his things and learn. Um, yeah, so I'll be forever grateful for that. And yeah, now I definitely have a much nicer tool set, though I am still pretty obsessive about trying to keep everything nice because I do appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, what does like your workspace look like?
Man, I should have a picture. I do about 4/5 of my work at the Allied Factory in person, and my workstation is like a 4 by 2 foot desk, and it's about 3 feet away from our extremely fancy like 30 by 30 foot downdraft booth. And then I have like a 15-foot table that has a bunch of masks and transfer papers and things like that for a lot of decal work and weeding, which is basically like, you're removing all the excess of decals. But yeah, it's a I don't know, very industrial looking space.
Yeah.